International Media TV, television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Yes, brothers and sisters, distinguished guests, some friends, and some enemies. In fact, as Malcolm X said so many years ago, I think we'd be fooling ourselves if we had an audience this large and did not realize that there were some enemies present. This afternoon, we're not here to talk about the ballot or the bullet. We're here to talk about the ballot. The ballot that elected Barack Obama President of the United States. Now, over the course of the primary and general election cycles, Amiri Baraka wrote a series of powerfully deciphering, inventive essays about then candidate Obama. So when my colleagues here at the public library got in touch with me over the summer about a program for this fall, immediately my thoughts turned to these essays and how wonderful it would be to bring Baraka with us today to speak about Barack Obama. Now, as a public speaker, as a poet, Amiri Baraka speaks with a rare authority of feeling and an undeniable sense of reality. And as an artist, he has been fundamental to the development of literature throughout the Americas, indeed throughout the world, for over 5 decades now. And he remains one of the most influential artists and poets in our world today. His contributions as a social critic, as a contributor to the historical biography of the music we know today as jazz, are nothing short of revolutionary. He is a towering and transformative presence in the history of the United States and throughout the world. And as poet Robert Hayden once said of Frederick Douglass, he is a man perfect in love and logic. So please join me today in welcoming to the stage Mr. Amiri Baraka. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This piece that I'm going to read, I wrote this 11/29/08, and that was maybe about the 5th essay that I started writing about. Actually, to tell you the truth, the reason that I started picking up Obama was because we went to my son was a councilman in Newark, you know. He was running for re-election, and so we went, and Obama was speaking, so my wife and I ran up the stairs to meet Obama, and he's coming down, he said, oh, there's that poet. I said, damn, the man's intelligent. This was called We Are Already in the Future. So this happened right after the election. Now, I have some comments since then, since that's a year ago, and I hope to publish all these essays, which is about 12 or 13 of them, at the beginning of the year. I see Jack Hirschman, and we have had some serious dialogue about this. So this was called We Are Already in the Future. At elections denouement, to the right, the outraged self-loathing of the loser and the losers, including one dude standing mutely in Michigan, a Republican delegate in a Klan suit, describing Obama as an Islamic communist. To the left, the self-important dreers who had urged us to throw our votes away. I went to several conferences where they told me, vote for this and vote for that one, as they objectively, in the name of their principles, gave votes to John McCain. Even dizzier, we supposedly hear from the left-right corkscrew terrorists, Al-Qaeda, insults that Obama is a house slave. But as I said, anyone who thinks suicide is revolutionary ain't all that bright to begin with. And as for the slave calling, best they refrain from drawing our attention to the fact that some of our ruling class always thought of black people as slaves. We are willing to be momentarily cool, though, remembering Mao's dictum, fight your enemies one by one. But back to reality. We have just won an election, we meaning the masses in the US, indeed the people of the world. I was in Italy and France and Spain and Norway during the period leading up to and through the election. In Italy, just before the election, at my readings, I urged the Italians to call the states. I told them I had gone to school with a bunch of their relatives, and so they should call them and tell them to come out and vote. In city after city in Europe, the crowds all seem to cheer for Obama's victory, and whoever seeks to downplay that victory is a fool or an enemy. We should understand the white supremacy junkies on the right. Their last pop was Old Dutch cleanser and salsa water, so they have had almost a cold turkey off that white supremacy they've been shooting up, though they're still dizzy from its fumes. But the left, or the soi-disant would-be left, are some who style themselves, what? Progressive, moderate, wheeze. Some of these, certainly the vote wasters, sound almost as pitiful. As one pitiful pundit warns us, Obama's election is to save capitalism, not bring equality to society. What a silly person. First of all, the very election of Obama has done more to bring some aspect of equality to the society than reams of pseudo-leftist posturing, which all returns in is merely to show that the writer is smarter than you are. But what dreary pundits would a McCain victory have done? And suppose your wasted vote had contributed to such, to always be on the outside, nitpicking away with not one sign of useful political practice or construction. This is too often what the left has become. I say it again, people who have never and cannot elect a dog catcher, but who are full of immense ideas about politics. Bah, humbug. No single election, my friends, will ever bring socialism, if that's what you really want. The struggle is protracted, hasn't that been said? We have yet even to convince the revolutionaries, in quotes, that they are in the United States. But Obama is not even in office yet. These pundits of pitifulness already have the whole card on what his governance cannot or will not do. This is especially irritating from those commentators who counseled us not to vote. One wonders if they think their counsel, which meant nothing, is more valuable than having that actual person with the widest mandate in history actually elected president. But to run off howling that it's not about this, it's not that, when we do not yet have a viable analysis of what it really is. Not to understand how that victory was achieved is to willfully miss a rare opportunity of learning how to master the capitalist electoral system. See, that's important. How to master the capitalist electoral system. If he did nothing else, he did that. And we on the left should be trying to understand how to harness, how to master that capitalist electoral system. One of the reasons we do not yet understand how to harness the electoral process to a revolutionary and socialist agenda is that too many of the very people who should be leading such a process denounce it or avoid it. To do what? Make statements and demonstrate? To withdraw from the most acceptable way of gaining power in the society defies understanding by any rational means, except for that hold that infantile leftism and anarchism have on too many, wishing to present themselves as revolutionary. The main focus of a revolutionary is the seizure of power. The main focus of a revolutionary is the seizure of power. Barack Obama raised hundreds of millions of dollars, much of which is a result of using the internet culture for fundraising and organizing. Let the foolish right agonize over their attempt at denigrating, quote, community organizer, unquote. They won't do that no more. Obama raised $150 million in October alone. He beat both Hillary Clinton and John McCain fundraising. Now that is amazing. That's what we should be studying, how to do that. That's what we should understand. How do you do that? You know. At one point, he wanted to buy an hour of time on CNN and lay out a complete campaign message, but CNN vetoed it. And here I thought that money was the ultimate boss. They vetoed that attempt. What the right cannot forget, nor the milksop left, is that Obama was and is smarter than both of them. That's what pisses them off. And more in tune with the popular mind, not only of the 90-some% of the Afro-American population, but obviously the great majority of Americans. What we can never forget that it was 90% of the Afro-Americans, 60 to 70% of the Asians, 67% of the Latinos, and a good group of progressive white people. That's the coalition that has to rule. That's the coalition we should be trying to put together. That's the united front we need to put together. That coalition. We can beat them people. We already showed them people. The bottom line of Obama's campaign was his initiation at the grassroots level in his appeal. The 2004 Democratic Convention is widely seen as the opening of his campaign, and I can accept that. But even to be there to do that, a first-term senator of color from Illinois, how did he get to be a senator in the first place? Do we know? Have we studied that? I watched the biopic on CNN. What I got from it is a skill developed as a what? Community organizer. If you read his book, Dreams from My Father, that whole initiation as an Afro-American in Chicago, that's very important. Very important. I see Michael McClure sitting in the audience hiding. But to organize significant groups around their own interests, and with that, connecting them in motion around some larger issue. Obama carried his Chicago, his Illinois constituency with him, and as he made more powerful, meaningful connections like an extension cord, his total reach and power expanded. For the left, we should never speak another word about politics unless we can understand and explain to our own constituents how this black man, okay, this person of color, okay, this half-white dude became president of the United States. Because it's just such grounding. But I tell you, some sister said to me, well, the only reason he got to be president because he had a white mother. I said, but all the presidents of the United States had white mothers. Because it's just such grounding in basic, everyday, electorally oriented politics that the left denounces and eschews. To all of our detriments in the main. The left holds rallies, makes statements. Community organization is almost as foreign to them as the right. But then the right does its community organization through the media. Usually when the left talks about the people or the masses, they come out of some comic book academic manual confusing the United States, the most highly developed 21st century monopoly capitalist society, with 19th century Russia or early 20th century China. Both largely peasant societies with small but developing working classes. The U.S. is neither. The U.S. is both a debtor and predator state at the same time, with a highly developed yet debt-burdened working class who are told every day that they are the middle class. There is a middle class, a petty bourgeois, a very, very affluent sector who are the lieutenants and paid liars, the middle management who are also deeply in debt. There is also a petty bourgeoisie, the teachers, the government workers, the civil servants, the office workers, etc. Racism still internally divides these classes horizontally, with the Afro-American people still at the bottom. Yet those same Afro-American people, nearly 50 million, have a gross national product of $700 billion a year, the 16th largest gross national product in the world. So let's say that you don't have no power, the power you have to decide how to use it. If you got $700 billion and 50 million people, you are not a chump. There have already been 4 revolutions in the United States. The first in the 18th century for independence, quotes, because in some ways it never completely happened. Check out British holdings in the US. Second revolution in the 19th century, the Civil War, which ended chattel slavery, supposedly with the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and competitive capitalism ushered in monopoly capitalism. It began to free the white worker from the land. The third revolution was the 50s to 70s civil rights and black liberation movements, which ended petty apartheid and segregation. The Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Bill, Brown versus the Board of Education. Though a case could be made that this was an extended motion that was initiated by the post-Civil War move out of the South, by millions of black people, transforming the Afro-American people from a largely peasant, rural people to a working class, an urban proletariat. The Obama election is the fourth revolution. What is needed now is for the would-be left, the revolutionaries, the progressive sector of the body politic, the communists, to correctly analyze and project widely just what kind of revolution this is. But more than that, lay out exactly what is to be done at this point. The entry to a new stage of US social development, like we used to say, what is the key link to make the next forward motion? We should know that the stage of society to which we're moving toward would be some kind of people's democracy. Fundamentally, this is the social base of Obama's victory, the so-called post-racial coalition. We understand that there is no such boogeyman yet existing concretely in the institutions and relations of US society, except that is the oncoming force that won the fourth revolution if we can identify it and seize it. And it is this force that must be harnessed as a living material entity in transforming US society. This would place us near the most advanced stage of bourgeois democracy. We can see monopoly capitalism crashing down around there in our heads. We have agreed to give the rulers $1 trillion so that they can continue to be rich, and the rulers. But for the would-be leftists to tell us that, and you know, my newspaper, we said, President Obama, no bailout, nationalize the oil industry, nationalize the banks. Of course, he didn't do that. But for would-be leftists to tell us that Obama's only, or that his primary function is to save capitalism by building a united front to rescue capitalism, not to bring a more egalitarian, anti-racist, anti-sexist, pro-environment society, that's, I quoted somebody. Why would anybody who is actually struggling for democracy say that? It sounds like the sour grapes of the people who wanted us to waste our votes. But even though they tell some 95% of the Afro-Americans and half of the rest of the American people, they still want to give us advice and instructions. Actually, it is they who need advice and instruction. To make such a one-sided, infantile leftist or trot-like analysis of the election would only turn that overwhelming majority whom you tail anyway, even more sharply and outspokenly against you. There is neither balance nor real analysis in that statement, just an attempt again to be more revolutionary than the people. But the task of the revolutionary is to lead the people by taking what they already know and giving it back to them with the focus of the present, the past, and the future. Plus, to see Obama's victory as simply a victory for monopoly capitalism is so thoroughly anarchist that it rejects the most important essence of the entire Obama drama. That is, it was the highest stroke of the civil rights movement, the highest stroke of the black liberation movement yet. We bled. We went to jail to integrate lunch counters, buses, public toilets, water fountains. Was that struggle just to create a united front to save monopoly capitalism? What a bizarre statement. Do you think Obama's victory less than those? It was a concrete victory for democracy. Don't you understand that you could say the victory of the North in the Civil War was just to preserve capitalism? You could say that. Yes, at a higher level. But don't you think the concomitant advance of the Afro-American people worth at least noting? So to say Obama's only function is to save monopoly capitalism, we say, quote, I'm glad you can dig it. But that's not all. to claim merely an anarchist or infantile position and not deepen the analysis so we can understand that monopoly capitalism cannot survive unless it adopts some aspects of social democracy. Obama's election is the first aspect of that social democracy. In the same way that Roosevelt's New Deal could not survive, even as a method of maintaining monopoly capitalism, unless it adopted important features of socialism, that is social democracy, that is social security, unemployment insurance. Those are socialist programs. That Roosevelt adopted those to save capitalism, yeah, but it was still an advance because you didn't have those programs before. The WPA, another key aspect of this coalition, means to call for refocusing of the $10 billion a month now spent on Iraq war. We spend $10 billion a month on the Iraq war. We have 6,000 people being foreclosed every day, you know, while we go around giving money to America. We should try to build a broad united front out of the consensus coming out of the 63% of the electorate that voted for Obama. One wonders how people in the black left who were in North Carolina, I was in one of the meetings I went around stumping for Obama, who were in North Carolina meeting and some others can really call for a smaller united front than the 100 or so people that were there. We need a broader united front. What we need is unity based on real struggle over actual objectives and motives. That is, being open and above board. This is Mao again. Being open and above board without conspiracy and intrigue. There are forces, for instance, who dropped out of the Black Radical Congress because they were angry about the alleged Communist Party USA domination. Domination of what? And to what end? Just as a somewhat earlier canard that they couldn't be in any group where there were white people. Well, then you can't be in the United States. We wonder, is this some fear of not being able to struggle for the correct line in these forces' presence? Too often it seems that some of the black left are really nationalists straining for a new identity by claiming to be left but never Marxist-Leninists. Some are black nationalists who claim left by being influenced by Trotskyist or anarchist stands. At any rate, we need an even broader united front, guided by genuine revolutionaries. And the rest of this, I mean, I'm talking about his, well, I guess I should say this because I wanted to talk about some other stuff and recently, but there's some question about Obama's appointments even before he's inaugurated. So you see with it, just as there were questions about him refusing public funding, like I said, he's smarter than you all. On the second issue, it should be obvious by now that Obama saw the public funding as it is now constructed to be a ruse to cripple his fundraising. While the Republicans would run ragtime and outraise him, just as Hillary would have done. On the Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, we should try to understand that this was a very smart choice. The constant calumny against Obama that he is a Muslim. The right kept screaming his middle name, Hussein, in hopes that would stop the Obama coaster that enveloped the country. The constant questions about his support for Israel or from the other side about his relationship to the Zionist entity were a constant negation Obama faced. Even now, after the election, the fool al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, hurls insults about Obama. Just as some ignorant American anarchists threatened to disrupt the inauguration because of Obama's Zionism and militarism. Rahm Emanuel's selection is due to confound those who are not thoughtful about just what challenges Obama faces. The ever-lurking actual Zionists will always make trouble until they can have what they really want. Not peace, but the entire Middle East as a fiefdom ruled by Israel. The Emanuel appointment stops Zionist mischief at the door. Karl Rove's television appearance blasting Emanuel as, quote, combative, ill-tempered, and foul-mouthed, that actually made me happy when he said Let the rumor mongers and mischief makers and other nattering nabobs try to cause havoc at the gates. I trust Emanuel to handle that as Chief of Staff, both the constant undermining question of the Zionists as well as the other who want to make Obama a Zionist. To be a friend of the Israeli people is no crime. To foster a Zionist dictatorship over the Middle East would be a crime. We cannot see Obama doing either. The first necessity of the Obama president is to put out a call for a nationwide Democratic coalition, which is yet not come, to heighten even further the attack on white supremacy and racism, even to fight to get these made illegal, unlawful. This would be the essence of this so-called post-racial coalition, which has already shown its potential power with the election of the president. The Kennedy years could have set something of a precedent, but his assassination, along with the assassinations of Malcolm X, Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy, you know how they cleared out the 60s movement? They killed every leader. Every one of them they killed. You know. And it's my contention that the people that did that put the last president and his father in office. All those assassinations peaked with the election of Nixon, and then the takeover at the end of the 70s by the Reagan steamroller, which has been with us in essence until today. Those assassinations were a right-wing coup, an oil-smelling coup that at its denouement was the invasion of the Middle East and the outright takeover of the oil fields. Did anybody ever see that film called 3 Days of the Cobra? What's his name? Robert Redford. You know, after he discovers and he says, he questions this guy and said, do we have plans for a war in the Middle East? See how long ago that was? That's what that was. Do we have plans? Yes, we do have plans, you know. There were a right-wing coup, an oil-smelling coup, that at its denouement was the invasion of the Middle East and the outright takeover of the oil fields, plus the move of the financial markets to where? Dubai, just before the crash on Wall Street. As an alternate to London and Wall Street, monsters covered with and bathing in oil. The crash of the financial markets in the US and to some extent worldwide can mark the end of this domination if we will move on the new precedent of Obama's election. Not only must this new Democratic coalition take on white supremacy and racism, but to oppose and struggle to end the domination of monopoly capitalism over the people of the United States in the war in Iraq and, in essence, its domination of the world. State ownership, nationalization, new funding for non-monopoly and small business, this Democratic coalition must be built into a permanent electoral presence as well to combat the still powerful and ruthless forces of white supremacy and the domination of society by monopoly capitalism. The Public Works New Deal should see Katrina damage New Orleans as a top priority. And seek to reconstruct the entire Gulf-ravaged area from Louisiana to Texas. The sagging infrastructure of bridges and tunnels. That bridge just fell again over there, right? Going into... Jesus. The sagging infrastructure of bridges and tunnels and urban structures must be repaired. This is one solution to chronic unemployment. Certainly these inner cities are in need of public dollars for employment and reconstruction. Just as in Depression 30s, Roosevelt's New Deal even supported the arts. We must see that our new Democratic coalition demands the same kind of support after years of Republican attacks on public support of the arts. We want to build a new Democratic coalition as an engine for the bringing of people's democracy. Any narrowing of this so-called post-racial coalition that elected Obama is a mistake. We must fight to make it real. Those who think that tailing labor, most of the labor bureaucrats are pushing economism as a substitute for political organizing and fueling candidates for every position. Every position. The left should run candidates for every position in the United States. Every position. We should contend with them for dog catchers, tax collectors, everything. We should, you know, because that's the politics of community organizing. The call for, if we don't do that, then simply we're able to continue our marginalization and the irrelevance of the left. The call for an anti-racist, anti-monopoly Democratic coalition is correct and necessary, and the only move that will give the genuine revolutionaries leadership of the progressive political struggle in the US. Now this was, I wrote this, I said, right after the election, you know. And I just want to tap some of these other things about recently. This was written a month or so ago, called Monopoly Capitalism in the Obama Presidency. I won't read it all, just some of it. We were in a country whose rulers brought Africans chained in the bottom of ships to be sold into slavery for hundreds of years. And now, 145 years after chattel slavery formally ended, in a multinational coalition of Afro-American, Latinos, Asians, and progressive whites elected the first Afro-American president, we have to debate whether racism still exists in this country. It is amazing that Americans can fool themselves so long and so often about the evil that they have done and continue to do to other Americans and to the world. To endure citizens so convinced of their own intellectual capacity, seemingly earnestly arguing that racism has nothing to do with criticism of Obama's attempt at health care reform, or most things for that matter. You know, first they criticized him because his dog didn't come from a pound. I don't know what other presidents' dogs came from a pound. We haven't investigated that. And he criticized his wife because she wouldn't use fertilizer on her garden. I mean, that was just a slow move. And thank goodness that that health care bill did pass yesterday. I think that's a very positive thing. Because where I live, we just suffered two double blows. Corzine, the Democratic governor, got knocked off. And our boy, Bloomberg, who spent $96 million and still only won by a couple thousand votes. So I thought that was very, very, innovating, all that money. But if one has viewed the signs in Washington, for instance, if you say that nothing to do with this half-black dude, that the criticism doesn't have anything to do with that, did you view those signs in Washington where the President of the United States is depicted as a witch doctor with a bone in his nose and a hammer and sickle at the bottom? Did you see that? That's Americans did that. Not no alien species. Americans did that. Or did you witness the rotting patriot of the Confederate flag shout, "You lie," at the President of the United States? No one ever dared to disrespect the master liar, Bush too, with such. Though to prove how the rest of the world is much less deceived about that world than the defective American mind, remember there was a brother in Iraq who threw a shoe at Bush, for which I celebrate. I sent out postcards and emails saying, "Happy Shoe Year." What should be considered, however, is from the beginning of this racial holocaust that has enveloped the world, certainly since the fall of Mali, the defeat of the Moors in the 15th century, 1492 is not only the date of Columbus' venture for treasure across the dawning Western Ocean, treasure and glory, both sanctioned by papal bull, what evil force has been behind it, the inexorable and relentless search for maximum profit, which has been the moral code of monopoly capitalism. What makes the whole scenario of resistance and criticism fly about Obama, a person almost universally praised just a few months ago, is the base of this criticism originates not just with race, but with profit. Only 43% of white Americans voted for Obama, yes. They would have preferred McCain. The most foolish would have preferred McCain because he was white. But among the most disingenuous, that preference was because they felt McCain would have made their money safer, their super profits safer. Need we mention that the media represents the same disingenuous, skulking crowd of losers? The media fiend, Rupert Murdoch, had the racist treachery to portray Obama as a monkey being shot by policemen, for which he should have been charged with treason by the Attorney General. I sent the Attorney General a letter. It is a federal crime to simulate the murder of the President of the United States. You can't do that. You should be taken to jail if you do that. It's very important to understand how the media, the newspapers, the radio, the television, the magazine, the films have mounted an unrelenting tirade against Obama. The most famous of these Obama haters, the O'Reillys, the Becks, the Hannitys, the Limpballs, the Dobbs, and his Berthas, they mount an endless tirade nightly. Nothing is more vicious than the Daily News, except, of course, Murdoch's trashy Mirror. But then the Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Village Voice, Channel 9, Channel 5, Channel 11 are all so owned by the same Australian Zionists. It was Bush too that allowed this greedy horde of media to be grabbed by one fanatic. Before that, it was against the law for one group or one corporation to hold both electronic media and paper media. They could own television, but not television and print. But since Bush, it is possible for one corporate monster to grab all forms of the media, and thus dominate popular opinion with one mindless cry. In fact, it was the media, this man named Glenn Beck, who I suspect of having got out of some institution, who introduced the current racist dimensioning of the Obama administration by calling Obama a white-hating racist. You mean he hated his mama? He hated his grandparents? Even though Obama, much to the irritation of many of his constituents, has scrupulously avoided outright condemnation of racial taunting which surrounds him straight out, or in code from various sides. But this is clearly the way the corporations will fight against Obama, the same way they were until the last days, relentless supporters of the lies and economic embezzlement and cries for wars and twin wars, that is rugged, i.e. mindless solipsism that characterized the Bush administration. This pervasive, withering influence is how they direct and force the nation in directions that only benefit the 0.6% that own the land, the communications, the banks, the factories, the food, the water, plus the means of production. Even 911 was used as a pretext to directly occupy the Middle East. This is why there's still no clarity on who, why, how of that attack. Osama bin Laden is supposed to have led the deed. He's not been seriously tracked. His family was flown by the FBI out of the U.S. the day after, without a question. If you're curious, you should read the book called The Family of Bush and the Family of Saud to see how the bin Laden family and the Bush family have been since the 60s partners in crime. So I don't want to read this whole thing. I know I'm supposed to answer some questions, but I just want to at least put that in there. You know, one more is one reason why I want to educate people about the tragedy of the Weimar Republic in Germany, the last democratic government before Hitler. After World War I, the German people elected a social democrat as president. Then the socialists, the communists, the social democrats, the unions, and the progressives, the lefts in general, started to fight each other about whether the government was socialist or not. In the meantime, Adolf Hitler was organizing, and in 1933, after the Reichstag was burned to the ground, just like 911, Homeland Security came out, just like Reichstag Enablement Act, 1933, and the Nazis seized power. But Hitler was not some demonic genius lone wolf. He was supported by some of the same corporations that still exist in Germany, Krupp, Thyssen, Schacht, they still exist. But who would downplay now that American corporate leaders also admired and supported Hitler's rise. DuPont, Union Carbide, Westinghouse, IBM, ITT, JP Morgan, they all supported Hitler. See? So, I mean, you've got to remember that you're not in some isolated planet. That these same forces exist. In fact, they park down the street. They're just waiting to come back here. They haven't gone nowhere. They haven't gone nowhere. And if you want to know why fascism, because that's what makes their money safe to stay. To remove democracy altogether. Obama's most important and most daunting task is the regulation of monopoly capitalism. He must find ways to shut down their anarchistic dismissal of the common good, the needs of the masses of people, in order to make their profits and super profits. The attempted regulation of the banks that he did is too timid, much too timid. At the point of the recent crash, there was a great opportunity to nationalize both the banks and the auto industry. It might sound crazy coming out of the mouths of the paid stooges in the media, but the same kind of thing has been done in Europe since World War II. So, other thing, immigration is another huge problem. Since the corporations favor the flow of non-documented workers, they favor the flow of non-documented workers for the same reason they do anything else, to make super profits. By being able to pay those workers less, and at the same time undermine the American workers' attempts to raise their standard of living, just as they did with black people in the 20s and 30s. They used us as scabs against white workers to keep white workers' salaries from going up. And so the intense hatred between black and white workers. But we cannot go for that. We cannot go for that. We cannot go for that. We cannot let them divide this coalition that has given us this victory. Even though that's why they are letting flows of undocumented workers in the country. We know that. They are letting them in here. That's the point. But we must utilize that coalition to fight the source of our pain. Remember, this is not white America anymore. You know, that whole thing about white America, that's over with. There ain't no white America. And the Senate and the House of Representatives, we know the Senate and the House of Representatives are filled with lobbyists for monopoly capitalism, lobbyists for the corporation. They're not representatives of the people. That's why we should be running for these offices. We do not even need a Senate. We need a single House based on one person, one vote. Obama's handicaps are the monopoly capitalist media and the character of the governmental body itself, willed as it is, filled as it is, with lobbyists for the same monopolists. Plus the deeply ingrained racism of white America and some black America too. Like, what about the head of the Republican Party, who they still, want to let you know he's attached to the Republican Party. That's why they call him, his name is Steele, so they want you to know who that is. He's what we call a real public coon. Or the Negro lady in Martha's Vineyard who criticized Obama for not reaching out to the black elite. She also characterized Michelle Obama as a ghetto girl. So, there's some crazy Negroes out here too. But Obama's strength is the strength of the multinational United Front that elected him. That is the basis for struggle for a people's democracy, which is the next step in our needed step toward actual socialism. Thank you very much.
In talking about the science of gaining and maintaining power, Mao spoke of the need to unite with the middle to isolate the reactionaries. And it would certainly seem that Obama has been able to accomplish this in great order. However, we have another problem, a historic problem here in the United States amongst progressives, or those who would call themselves progressives or to the left of the left, to confront the racism in their own communities, at the same time being very quick to define it. Could you speak to this problem and the historicism of it, of progressives and people on the left unable to confront their own racism and find coalition and common cause with people of color and the third world?
Well, I don't know. It's to be an American is to be raised up with certain racist views, even if you're black. I mean, it's very difficult to avoid what is really the kind of paradigm of American social relations. So I remember there was a group in Chicago who jumped up and said, "We just ran the Klan out of Chicago," and I said, "Now the goal is to run them out of your own organization." Because it is a problem. But I think the problem is that a lot of what would turn out to be, racist ideas gets enfolded into an ideology that has nothing to do with race. It essentially picks goals that are not necessarily used to advance the equal rights and self-determination of the whole people, But it's a problem. You have to do that. I think if you're interested in social struggle, you have to always try to vet your own mind, vet your own ideology, vet your own policies to see that you're not being exclusive, It's difficult, I think. You see how quickly after Mao left that the Chinese are having problems with their own nationalities, and you see how quickly after the socialist government fell in the Soviet Union that they're having wars with their nationalities. When part of what Leninism was, and even Mao, was how to deal with the question of the majority nationality and the different oppressed nationalities, how to create united fronts with them. And it's the problem, you know, even locally, you know. I mean, they study it. It's not spontaneous. You know, in Newark, suddenly we have a Negro mayor who spent $6.5 million. So he wasn't an everyday Negro. He spent $6.5 million to get into office, who removed all the top 10 black police officials and replaced them with whites, who raised our taxes 8%, who now wants to sell our water. He wants to sell 38,000 acres of land where we have the water for the whole city to an unknown municipal water authority. Probably is paying back. But I'm saying the whole question of race is used in the main as a way to maximize profits. Otherwise, you know. So that if you're going to make the top 10 police in Newark white and Latino, no blacks, what are you doing that for? If suddenly we have a rally and we're surrounded for the first time in 40 years, because Newark was in 1970, you look up and it's all white police. What are you doing that for? What is it that you want the people to think? You want them to go back to 1967 and set fire to the town? You know, with a Negro heading it, that could be done. But that's what I'm saying. Why do you do that? To divide, because they know the forces they're dividing. See, they get you to fight those same people you're supposed to be uniting with.
This has become an increasing problem since Obama has taken office, with many of his decisions, some fantastic, some egregious, yet many on the left, despite the fact that the Republican Party is beginning to resemble more and more circulated email, seem to be able to regurgitate the talking points of this extreme right without even getting the memo, without any kind of analysis of what they might be dividing. Could you speak to that?
The Republican Party is the new Ku Klux Klan, man. What they've done is taken off their white robes, put on the mufti, put on their civilian uniforms, and gone. The Klan is a marginal force. The GOP is not. You know what I mean? And tied to the GOP is the same people who tied to Hitler, the corporations. The right cannot exist without the corporations. That's corporate power that you see, you know. So, you know, when a dude jumps up and says, "You lie," no, what did you do that? I mean, what's the point of that? To actually denigrate the presidency, to make it seem, yeah, I can say anything to this spook that I want to say, you know. But that's what we're facing. You're facing. In other words, if a half white dude can be, or a half black dude can be the president of the United States, then the Klan can become the Republicans. Everything got to move up a notch. Can't be old time stuff. It's got to be new level stuff. You understand? But I mean, this is a strange country. It's not even a year since he was elected. Did we think that all the stuff that's been with us all these years is going to go away? But it just means that, like I say this again, the coalition that elected him has to stay together and fight these other people. You cannot do it otherwise. You have to fight them. Now, you almost have to shoot people to get them to pass health care. I mean, that's incredible. Even people who needed health care, they don't want it. Black health care. Then you had girlfriend Sarah Palin. What was she talking about? A death something? A death what? But I mean, I'm glad women got insulted when McCain tried to foist her on us, you know, because for a hot minute I said, oh, he pulled the master stunt. But then when she opened her mouth, I knew they had made a mistake, you know. But this whole thing about death lists or whatever, you know. But anyway, it's the same struggle. That's what I'm saying. It's at a higher level. That's all. It's just a higher level. It's the same struggle. It's just at a higher level. That's all. And you have to adjust to that higher level. and adjust your defense to a higher level. You have to have a more sophisticated. It was easier, now we say that, 50 years later. It was easier to struggle to give straight out white supremacy, but don't think they're going away. It's just slicker, you know. We're supposed to be slicker too.
Since the Reagan-Bush junta in American politics has taken hold and extended itself through the media, we have people like Roger Ailes, one of the architects, along with Lee Atwater, of the Willie Horton campaign. Roger Ailes now is the head of Fox News, for instance. You mentioned Rupert Murdoch. Happening simultaneously, the thirst for images of black people broadcast in the media, which are degraded or humiliated, seems to be ramping up. Simultaneously, groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which track the activity of hate groups, are finding themselves unable to keep track of the amount that these numbers are increasing, and increasing also recruitment directly from the military. Simon Wiesenthal Center has also corroborated these things. There are so many threats against the president's life that the Department of Justice can't keep track. What do you see in relationship to the role of the media in this problem?
I mean, it's an enemy force. You know, it's an enemy force. I mean, capitalism is built on slavery, straight out. Now, they're not going to let go of slavery. You know, they have to be forcibly forced out of slavery. You know, they're not going to give it up. They're not going to give it up. There's no reason. Like I say, black people got all this money, you know, and all this population, but the media is not telling us that. The media is telling us the opposite. You know, you all ain't no good, you ain't doing nothing, you're messing up, you're killing people. But that's why part of our task as revolutionaries is to create another cultural revolution. We need a cultural revolution. We need a cultural revolution. We need to be able to say things to the people of the United States that are not being said in the media. The media, they know no more. You're not going to see Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael on television no more. You're not going to see nothing like that no more. They're not going to have us sitting up on television telling you what's happening. That's over with. The only people you're going to see on there are fools, actors, and athletes. You're not going to see nobody sitting up there telling you da 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 da. You're not going to do that. That's over with. That's over with. They understand that, you know. So it's very hard to watch Fox News and CNN. It's very difficult to watch it. My wife does all the time. She's got a stronger stomach than I. When she starts talking back to the television. I mean, I was on O'Reilly's program, you know, he was interviewing me, and I kept thinking, now suppose it was a smack this motherfucker decided to. Could I do like the Los Angeles Police Department and deny it was me? You know, as who said that? Richard Pryor said that. Who are you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes? You know? No, but I mean that's not an interview. That's an attack. He's gonna attack me, and I'm supposed to sit up there and be intelligent. No, at some point you have to say, wait a minute. But that's what the media does every day. When I was a professor at Stony Brook, I used to tell my class, this is one of their assignments all the time, I want you to take out of the newspaper or report in the, you know, television or radio, anything that is anti-black, anti-working class, and bring it to us to discuss. Every week we would have that discussion to open our class. I read this, I read this, I read this. What does it mean? What does it mean? To start to, you know, because education has been repressed too. People are afraid. We were in a panel last night. A woman said she's afraid because she's just what do you call those that don't have a regular gig? Adjunct. But that's why you're adjunct. That's why they make you an adjunct. See, so they know they shut you up. They get rid of you. You know, the society, the contradiction is inexorably going both ways at the same time. You get this, you know, half black president, so a lot of people are cooled out. It's over. The struggle's over. We don't have to do anything. But that is a dangerous idea. It's a very dangerous idea. Because remember, there's some people who want to pay you back for that. These people that say we want our country back. They want to pay you back for that. Just like in Weimar, the right, and they had the right burst loose in Germany last week. Did you see that marching in the street with the swastikas and stuff? Not swastikas, that's outlawed. But what's the secret symbol for Hitler? 8-8. 8-8. So Heil Hitler, 8-8. So they're marching down there with 8-8 on it. That stuff it's not going away. It has to be fought.
There certainly is no question that here in the United States and blacks throughout the Americas really remain ruled by the slave codes. And one of the more recent incidents that revealed this in full relief was the arrest of Henry Louis Gates, of Skip Gates. However, the great irony, of course, with that is that Skip Gates has been one of these people who has been trying to push along this idea that somehow racism is a purely social phenomenon for over 2 decades now, getting away from a systemic analysis.
Well, Skip was angry because the man mistook him for a black person.
There was a recent book by Houston Baker about the betrayal of the civil rights era by black intellectuals like Skip Gates. Could you speak to that larger phenomenon?
Skip, no, I get just to know. Skip is Skip. I mean, he's got all the money and all. But the thing about Skip, in 2001, he invited me to speak at Harvard 4 lectures for which we're going to pay you this, and then we're going to publish it as a book. Then when I got into that trouble with the poem of mine, only people I know where poets can go to jail for poems. That's wild, So then suddenly I didn't hear from Skip about this. So I called his office, no response, he ain't in, blah, blah, blah. So then I stumbled on his cell phone number. And I called him up, and he answers me, and this is literal, he answers me, he said, "Hello, buddy." And then what came to my mind is that's the same thing that Nixon used to call his wife, "Hey, buddy." So then he told me that, I said, "Skip, you haven't really done this because of that poem, or I can't reach you." And he says, "No, buddy. I told the people at Harvard that if you couldn't come up there to speak, I was going to resign." See, I thought maybe he got high then or something. No, that was a lie. But that's, that's an unfortunate situation that happened. The black judge said on television that if he had stayed in his house and just told him to get out, he would have been cool. But the minute he came out on the sidewalk with all that fictitious ghetto talk, he was going to jail. And what's tragic is the Obama thing, because what Obama said was on the money when he first said that. It's stupid. But then the whole crowd, who we supposed to be fighting, get him to moderate that and invite him down to drink beer. But that's the kind of thing I'm saying. Those people should not have more power than we have. And if we abandon this coalition, we'll be back in the same old groove. The same old groove. You don't have to like the people that you in coalition with to fight the right. They don't have to. If you're a Muslim, they don't have to be a Muslim. They don't have to be a Christian, they don't have to be a nationalist, they don't have to be a communist, they don't have to be a vegetarian. They just have to agree on one thing that we want to unite around. That's all. Yeah. You can say, I don't even like that person. That's what they do in the Congress of the United States. They fight all day, all night, and then at the end they say, I don't even agree with that, but that's what we're going to do. That sophistication is lacking among us. We still believe in, we still in sectarian, we can unite around a specific issue, that's it. Do this issue, we can unite around that, Are you not going to convince me to be Muslim or a Christian or a nationalist again or a vegetarian again? But there's some things we can agree on. We can agree on some things. We can. And if we can't, something is wrong,
You mentioned poetry, and of course, Somebody Blew Up America, who is doubtlessly the most famous poem of the 21st century thus far. And many of us are familiar with the circumstances surrounding your laureateship of the state of New Jersey. But if I may step back a little bit, I'd like to ask you about some of the poets who had an impact on your consciousness and development as an artist. When I read your work from the very beginning up to now, I can still feel reverberations of people like Charles Olson. When I was looking through letter 9 and preparing for this afternoon from the Maximus poems, in the concluding stanza, I read this: I measure my song, measure the sources of my song, measure me, measure my forces. And this seemed to resonate for me with some of your work. Could you talk to us about what Olson means for you?
Olson was a great poet and a great theorist of poetry. When I came to New York, after first I got kicked out of the university. Then I joined the Air Force, and I got kicked out of the Air Force. I came to New York, and Ginsberg, who I had read about in the Village Voice, and it was Ginsberg who told me all of these people's names, and along with see, New York, that's a whole discussion, man. You want to talk about New York 1957, that's a hell of a discussion, But there were groups that were fighting against academic poetry. The San Francisco group, here's friend McClure over there right now. It's Jack Hirschman and the San Francisco group, Then there was the so-called Beats with Allen and Corso and all those people, And then the Black Mountain people, Creeley, Olson. And then the New York people, Frank O'Hara, really. And later on, the whole Black Arts group, myself and the people that went to Harlem, Larry Neal and Askia Touré. We were fighting against academic poetry. We were fighting against poetry that sought to bring over English verse styles, iambic pentameter as a death weapon against poetry, And it was really, I say this, and I say this very openly, it was really Ginsberg who hit me to that when I first came, because of all the people I met first in New York, he was a scholar. Of all the wiles about the beat generation, all that shit, Allen Ginsberg was a scholar. Nobody don't know that, you don't know that, you don't know that. But that's the truth, you see. And so Olson was another scholar and an intense poet, and I learned from them. It's true. And what I think even people like McClure and Hirschman would agree is that we were all trying to find our voice in the general kind of scramble to get rid of academic poetry. We were not enlisting in any school. We were trying to, it was a united front. I mean, I heard about McClure from Ginsberg. Some of those folks in that united front I did not like at all. But some of them were good friends of mine. They were very good friends of mine. And Charles Olson was I published a lot of his early essays myself. I published the projective verse and all those things, because they helped me to understand how to get away from dead poetry. When I was in Puerto Rico, I was stationed in Puerto Rico. I was in the Air Force. After I got thrown out of Howard, I joined the Air Force like a fool. I was stationed in Puerto Rico. And start writing poetry all the time, sending it away, it would come back, sending it away, it would come back. Sewanee Review, Hudson Review, Partisan Review, all of that. And I remember one day reading a poem in the New Yorker magazine. I think it was it James Dickey or one of those deadbeats like that, and I read the poem. And it actually brought tears to my eyes because I was thinking, I could never write that. I mean, that's not even interesting. Bird baths and, lawns and taking the 545 back to Massachusetts, And when I looked out of my window, I didn't see no bird baths and no lawns. So then I made a thing, a commitment that later, when I found other people who apparently had made the same commitment, I was going to find a way to write what I wanted to write. Because if you imitate other people, you're going to imitate their point of view. Even if you're just imitating how they write, you're going to imitate their philosophy. That's in it. It's in it. So that's what that was, and Charles was a very influential person. What was he, 6'5", 6'6", 6'8"? He lived up in Gloucester. He was an important person. He was director of, is that what you call it, Black Mountain College for a while. He was a very important person and very, very aggressive in his views about poetry. The whole thing of breaking up the line and using the typewriter to replicate your voice placement. What Ginsberg said about the whole question of Williams' thing about, American speech. Because the four poets that went to Europe, Pound and Eliot, they stayed there. Williams and Langston Hughes came back. See, and that question about using your language has always stuck with me. Write a poem in your speech, the way you write, not to think of some fanciful, pseudo speech that comes out of Europe. So it's come back though. See, it's not gone. All of those people I talked about, whether I'm talking about Larry Neal, or Henry Dumas, or for that matter, Michael McClure, Jack Hirschman, they have brought that old academic shit back and covered everybody up, the black and the white. They might throw out a little bone to Ginsberg every once in a while, usually about how crazy he was, or the beats with this, or this shit, riding wild across the country. The whole question of poetry has been covered over. It's been covered over. I wrote an essay called "Why Poetry is So Boring Again."
Throughout the centuries, from the first times that Africans were brought to the Americas as slaves and up and through most of the history of this country, our literacy was a capital crime. So much so that even those who would teach us to read and write would also be killed. And as a result of that, our music, our oral traditions, have been the repository of our story, our memory. And that has informed traditions in blues and jazz and gospel, obviously. And as a writer, as a social critic, you have been instrumental in bringing that message forward. One of the people who has been very important to you in that was John Coltrane. And I was wondering if you could speak to us today about that music and the legacy of free jazz and where you see that going today in terms of carrying that message forward. You mentioned Sterling Brown last night as someone who helped you come into an understanding of how that tradition informed the music, how that stolen history was transformed through that music.
Well, see, first of all, remember that at the time, Coltrane, Miles Davis, all those people, Thelonious Monk were playing, the world was in great disorder. There was turbulence going around the world, and the artists, the writers too, reflected that turbulence. We reflected what was happening in the world. from 1950 something, I was Emmett Till, 55, the Montgomery bus boycott, 56, 58, they blow up King's house, 1959, Castro marches into Havana, 1960, Greensboro sit-ins, the creation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Stokely Carmichael. That stuff was happening. And we were reflecting that, and so were the musicians. They were reflecting, whether they said it or not, they were reflecting that. Like you listen to a piece of John Coltrane's called Alabama. Now I asked him about that. I said, John, I wrote the liner notes for Live at Birdland. I said, John, what did that Alabama, what did that mean? He said, it just made, he said, when I thought of Alabama, and they were down there struggling, it made me think of this music. Now when you play that, he said, when I thought of Alabama, what was going on, it made me think of this music. Now if you play that music, Alabama, I defy you not to be made deeply sad and thoughtful by that. He ain't said nothing about the bus boycott and, the little girls being blown up, because that was happening. But listen to Alabama. You see what I mean? And because music does not have to have words to give you ideas. Music gives out ideas. That's why they have sad music and happy music. It gives out ideas. So that music during that period was reflecting the turbulence going on in the world. There was some that came straight out, and said it. Train, Underground Railroad, Nina Simone, Mississippi, goddamn. It was always that, but at the same time, the music at whatever level. I remember I went in a record store in New York when Jackie McLean came out with this record called Let Freedom Ring. And the guy says to me, the trouble with you people is you don't know the difference between music and politics. So, I left him with the typical New York suffragette upon leaving. Fuck you. That would be the only correct speech in that situation. But I'm saying this dude, although that title is a little obvious, Let Freedom Ring. But that's Jackie McLean. Nobody ever thought Jackie was, straight out militant. But that's what he was saying, let freedom ring. When all those people came in, Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Albert Ayler, all those people, what did they talk about? Free jazz.
Right.
What do you want to free it from? Tin Pan Alley. We want to free it from the American popular song. We'll take those songs and we'll use the chords. We won't even use that melody no more. Let's bebop. But all of that thing about freedom, that emphasis on freedom, is because for black people, freedom is something that we wanted and loved and wanted in anything, whether it was music or dance, or be free, And that's what that was. For Train, who became the freest of those musicians, I was lucky enough to live near the 5 Spot, a door away from the 5 Spot during that whole period, upstairs. And when he began to play with Monk, I would go down every night. I would go down in the 5 Spot every night to hear that. I went down there when Train was trying to learn to play that music. He couldn't play it. He said he went to Monk's house and Monk was in the bed. Monk, get up. Monk don't say nothing. Monk sit down at the piano and play them tunes over and over. And about a week or so later, Train came back and he could play the tunes. And the minute he started playing them, Monk would jump up from the piano and start dancing. But then I discovered that was his way of conducting,
Okay, I want to, one final question, and then I should underline the point that after the Q&A with the audience, we're going to have a book signing, and there are books available at the back. On January 17th in 1961, Eisenhower delivered his oft-quoted speech warning of the military-industrial complex. But at this same moment, Eisenhower and the Dulles brothers had hatched a plan to assassinate Patrice Lumumba, a plan that JFK, who was about to enter the presidency, signed off on, just to be clear, with the boys back at Langley and all. And although much has been made of your trip to Cuba, I know that the impact of Lumumba's assassination was tremendous on you, and that you were down at the UN shortly after the news broke. Could you talk to us about the impact of Lumumba in particular?
Well, remember, that was the African Liberation Movement. The Lumumba thing was one of the first breakthroughs, aside from Nkrumah earlier. And so we saw that as a blow, really. I mean, it's interesting that some of the people that were there at the UN, Abby Lincoln, Maya Angelou, who ran up into the UN, you know, when our boy Bunch was talking about how he was embarrassed by these Negroes cutting all the food out here, you know. And I met poets there that I didn't know were poets. You know, Larry Neal, Fikir Touré. We were there as black people denouncing the assassination. Rockefeller, Union Minière, Belgium, Secret Forces, United States. Eisenhower probably knew. That's what he was. He was so guilty, conscious, that he talked about the military-industrial complex. He knew
Absolutely.
that they had killed Lumumba. And this has been a bloody history, man. I mean, when you think about that, you know, they overthrew Nkrumah's government. They killed Lumumba. I mean, it just, all of those great African leaders at that time went out of there. You know, they used to be the leading intellectuals. Amilcar Cabral, they murdered them. And the Portuguese, Newark is the largest concentration of Portuguese, and we shut that down, the whole Portuguese community when that happened. You know, Cabral had just come back from the United States. You know, the book called The Weapon of Theory, that's the great book of his. You should read that Weapon of Theory. But we saw our future tied to Africa because the great intellectuals were there. And see the difference between Africa and African Island. They had guns. They were fighting those people. Now neocolonialism, and Cabral predicted this, imperialism ruling through native agents. And so now Africa is more messed up in a lot of ways. Colonialism is gone, in quotes. But if you don't think Gulf is over there in Nigeria,
Right, AFRICOM.
killing Ken Saro-Wiwa and murdering those people, you don't know what's happening. All those wars in Africa, those are contending imperialist groups, you know. So it shows you 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's what Lenin said. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. You got rid of colonialism, now get rid of neocolonialism. That's what it is. That's the struggle. You know, like in Newark, we got rid of the white people. We thought we had done something. You know what I mean? They say, now you must deal with the Negro, which is much more difficult. Much more difficult dealing with people that look like you. Much more difficult. Let me tell you from my own experience. My son is running for councilman. Again, he was the deputy mayor for 4 years. Had no money. He didn't receive any money. Now the new mayor has appointed 4, 5, 6 deputy mayors making $176,000 a year. You know. So I mean, you know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about what we've seen from President Obama, who has appointed into education someone who supports the policies straight down the line that have come from the previous administrations.
You're talking about Arne Duncan?
I am, and I'm talking about the problem in the classroom for the teacher and for the child, that they have no freedom. there is now a really orchestrated, balletic, you read the text, you use the script to teach all the children the same thing as they are learning in the next room on the same day. And this, as we know as teachers and as humans, doesn't work. And so all of the art, all of the heart, all of the poetry that the teachers I support as a person of age, all of that is being ripped from them, and all the people I know my age say, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. There would be no room for our artistry, for our intelligence. And I would love to hear your how answer, your answer about how to move in a better direction. Because if the president had offered to the children of this country what he has gotten for his two beautiful children, it would be very different. Thank you.
I can't really speak on Arne Duncan. I haven't studied what he's done that closely. I am sort of appalled that Obama does support charter schools. I don't support charter schools. And I'm pretty sure Arne Duncan must. I don't have any information on that. But I know in Newark we spent $67 million on charter schools last year, and now our public schools declared a deficit. So I can't support in conscience, you know, but I can't dismiss Duncan because I don't know enough about his state. I know in Newark we're in bad shape because the state seized our schools, was it 12, 13 years ago? And Corzine, who just got unelected, was supposed to return directorship to the city, but I doubt that the Republican Christie will. So I can't really talk about that. But if you direct me to some kind of document that explains Duncan's positions, I'll be glad to read it back to you.
Good talk. Some of it. You and I agree on a lot of things. I was down there at the 5 Spot every night watching Monk and Global Ware and Shadow Wilson.
I can't hear you. Yes.
Said you and I agree on some things. I was down there at the 5 Spot every night watching Wilbur Ware and Shadow Wilson and Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane, learning that music and becoming John Coltrane.
All right.
One thing we don't agree on is this gentleman named Rahm Emanuel, a member of the Israeli Defense Force, appointed by Barack Obama very, very soon after he was elected.
You talking about Emmanuel?
I'm talking about Rahm Emanuel. No?
What about him?
But what I want to just recall to you is that for 22 days prior to Barack Obama's inauguration on the Mall, the Israelis bombed the people of Gaza, as Curtis LeMay used to say, back into the Stone Age.
Yeah, I know that, brother. Ask me the question. No, I know that.
I'm going to ask you a question, but you're going to listen to what the question is going to be.
Okay, what is it going to be?
The question is, do you find it curious that Barack Obama, during those 22 days of genocide, never opened his mouth about it?
In Gaza.
And that on the 18th of January, 2 days before his inauguration, the Israelis stopped bombing Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
No? Has Barack Obama ever said anything about that genocide? No.
Mm-hmm.
No? How can you sit up there and tell us that this was some kind of way to neutralize the Zionist lobby, when in fact the Zionists massacred, genocided 1,400 people, and your president never said a word about it?
Well, let me say this. I can agree with that. I can agree with that. I would say this, though. I think Obama has said more to Israel than any president we've had. You know, the question about stopping those settlements is important. But what do you think, if he would say that, what do you think the Israelis would say? What would they, do you think they would stop, or what do you think?
I think that it was a moral position.
Oh, okay.
As the leader of the United States, as a person who had been elected as the first person of color to be the president of this country, with millions of people in the palm of his hand, waiting for every word that he was going to say, that if he had criticized, and there's more than criticizing the genocide of the people, the Palestinian people, that it would have had a great impact on the world, a much greater impact on the world than the speech in Cairo. It would have, in fact, changed things.
Right. Well, I'd say this. You know, Israelis, he told Israelis to stop the settlements. Have they stopped? No. They've not stopped.
That isn't the way you tell it.
Wait a minute
What you
now.
say is you just cut them off.
Has Netanyahu said anything else than the way he's been saying? Since then? No.
He hasn't said anything else.
See, I don't want to get to you with a struggle over, you know, Zionism, because I already got in trouble over Zionism, and I don't think that speaking about it, I have spoken about it relentlessly, which is why there's no poet laureate in New Jersey. I don't have no problem speaking about Zionism, but I'm saying for you to think that Obama can do everything that the Israelis have put in place all these years. I mean, that's how George Bush the first got put out of there, criticizing the Zionists for going into Lebanon. That's why he got lost his election to Clinton. The thing is that I can't approve of everything that Obama's doing, but I think the idea of him saying you got to stop these settlements, I think that was a positive thing. And I think we're going to have to wait at least to the second term, you know, for something else. I don't believe that you can just wave your hand and make Netanyahu and cool out. They're not going to do that. Remember this, it was not the Arabs that killed Yitzhak Rabin. You know, it was not the Arabs that killed Yitzhak Rabin.
How about saying stop the killing? That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's all you're going to say.
Listen to me. Don't argue against it. Listen to me.
I stop the killing is not new, brother.
Good evening. We're very honored to have you here today, and especially your consciousness in this year. I am in positive art projection, and I want to know your views on the government's propaganda in terms of how we should feel about 2012.
How we should do what? I'm sorry.
How our views should be about 2012.
What should be happening in 2012?
And the government.
I think we should try to elect this man again, because I think some things are going to be possible in the second term that is not possible in the first term. I think some things, if you say them in the first term, you're not going to have a second term. So my idea is that we have to elect Obama. See, because the thing that I think is that in 10 months we have forgot what Bush was like. We forgot that completely. We think that we are now focusing on he's not doing this, he's not doing this, he's not doing this, he's not doing this. But 10 months ago, you didn't even have the sanity to say that. I mean, you know, we wasn't even at that level. So it's a question. I know there's a lot of things, you know, certainly I would disagree with a lot of things, but at the same time, I'm trying to look at a more strategic figure of what is possible. You know, what is possible. And I know that whatever Obama does, he is ringed around with the extreme right in the Congress and these corporations and their running dogs, the media. He's ringed around with them, you know. And if you consider what that must be like, if it was you in there, and you had these social democratic ideas that you wanted to see happen, some of those ideas will not happen. These people will die rather than lucky we had that healthcare thing, you know. But 12, we have to mount another campaign. We should be mounting campaign now to fight against the right. I think that's the most important thing, to fight against the right. I don't see this. Whatever Obama can achieve, solid. We support what we can support. We oppose what we have to oppose. But our main struggle got to be against the right. We have to fight the people.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you so much for being here.
My name is Mary Jean Robertson. I do a radio show called Voices of the Native Nations on KPOO Radio.
What does it do with it?
Voices of the Native Nations. And I just wanted to get your comments on that wonderful community organizer in the White House that invited 565 tribal leaders for the first time to talk to the people. And also to get your comments on the fact that every single time there is a Native organizing event, like the 40th anniversary of Alcatraz. 40 years ago, Alcatraz was occupied, and the media died down when Nixon went through his own, Watergate experience. The South Dakota people had all kinds of things going on after Wounded Knee, and that died down when 2 FBI agents were killed, so that 1/3 of the reservation was given away to a uranium mining and milling corporation. So it's like every single time something happened, and this time at the White House, the overwhelming media event was the killing on Fort Hood. So it's like every time there is a Native presence that's able to actually contribute something to the body politic, there's always something that takes that away. Can you comment?
Something that does what?
That takes the forward movement away.
Yeah. Well, you should know who you're dealing with. The whole, first time I ever went to a reservation, to go off the main road and go to Indian territory, I was really shocked because I didn't realize that it was that just wiped out. I didn't realize that there was enough, that they actually had left the Native American people to just be there in that. You know what I mean? It wasn't, in other words, it's not hooked up to the United States, except, like you said, to diminish their power. And it's not new. Y'all was here before we was, and attacked for the very same reason. When you say Native American, that should tell you something. But did you see this movie called The Good Shepherd? Remember the guy it was Joe Pesci, was arguing with Matt Damon, and Matt Damon came to arrest Joe Pesci. Matt Damon is the CIA. And so Joe Pesci says, we Italians, we got, families, we got, religion. He said, these blacks, they got their music, and so forth. He says, what do you have? The guy says, the United States. And that's what that is. No matter what it is, we have the United States, and they're going to live and die by that, and any question of equal rights, when you say equal rights, for whom? When you say self-determination, by what measure? They're not going to allow, whatever you try to do, they're going to try to squeeze you down, keep you back, and we don't understand the complexity of this kind of rule, is what we should be studying. How to kill the serpent. You say, get rid of the white people, get rid of the white people. We get rid of the white people. The serpent is still there. You know what I mean? So the question is, how do you slay the serpent? That's the question. Can I say? My wife's grandmother is Cherokee from North Carolina, so they always tell me about Native American, but it's just a struggle. It's just a long struggle. That's what I tell you. But I'll tell you one thing we need is more information about everything, more newspapers, more internet thing. We need more and more communication. We need to know the enemy that we're facing. And all you young people, what are you doing? Where is our revolutionary movies? Where is our $1,000 films, you know, where's our newspapers and revolutionary theaters and printing presses? You know, we shouldn't get passive. You know, we should use this opportunity to expand what we can do, not to detract. Yes?
You're doing good.
So far, so good.
Yeah, so far so good. I like it. You know, it's very interesting. You know, basically for the most part, pretty much what you're saying, sir, is I really agree with it. One of my concerns is what's really happening in this country with the African American men as well as Hispanic men that are incarcerated, and their role as well as not their role regarding the political climate and landscape.
You're talking about Afro-American women, you said?
Both, because we also noticed that there's a proliferation of women, African-American women, that are infiltrating the prison system. So my concern with that is that to continue the trek where we need to go and having everybody involved in the process, I'm a little bit concerned and wondering what's happening politically, you know, with the dismissal not only of the African American population as well as the Hispanic population, but also more and more African American women that are becoming a part of that landscape. And where is that going, if you can speak on that, you know, politically, or can we get something out of it?
I know Angela Davis wrote a book on the whole increasing presence of black women in the prison system.
I was with Angela down in Los Angeles talking about that for a little bit.
And see, that would be their interpretation of equal rights.
Which is why I brought that up.
It was important. It was interesting to me that Obama, and after 30 days, passed the whole thing, equal pay.
That better
The equal women, because one wonders, since Hillary was in there 8 years, why they didn't do it. You know, they passed that equal pay thing. Why? Because that's more closely attached to capitalism. They do not want any equal pay thing. And in terms of the prison system, the more equality you demand, the more you're going to get equally your ass beat. I mean, in terms of how they deal with it in social relations. The more equality you demand, then the more likely you are to go to jail for the same things, you know. So the jail's now filling up with black women. But it's the same system. I don't know how that can be diminished. I think that the question we talk about, United Front, that's one of them, you know. What is happening to black women in prisons, Latino women, how do they get in there? What is people have statistics on that, but what do you do about it? The same thing, you have to organize. You have to organize at the roots level, you know. My son now, they're organizing around this anti-violence thing. There's all these organizations around anti-violence. These brothers shooting each other every night, you know, in Newark. And, but there's several different organizations. You see, there's one called Stop Shooting. There's one called, you know, the Amiri Baraka Coalition. There's one called, you know, POP, People's Organization for Progress. There's one called this, one called the NAACP. All those organizations need to meet at least once a month. All the diverse organizations need to meet once a month. Just drop that sectarianism for a month.
But you know, sir, I kind of agree with what this gentleman was saying.
Excuse me, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me pull this up. Can you hear me now, sir? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Louder? Can you hear that? Okay. The thing that I want to say is sort of like what this gentleman was saying a little bit earlier. You know, you call it what you will. There seems to be some sort of genocide that's going on, and it's been going on for a long time. And I'm just a little bit concerned as to when you say the socialist movement. So what? The whole socialist population needs to rise up. That's like what? Everybody in this room to have something to rise up against the prison system or the capitalistic system, because the prison system is capitalistic in itself.
There are issues which are not preeminently anti-capitalist issues. They are, in essence, anti-capitalist issues. There's issue, for instance, got police brutality. That's not, on the face of it, anti-capitalism. It is, in essence. But you can say, we against police brutality, and be a socialist, a communist, a vegetarian, or a nationalist. You understand? That's what I'm saying. All of those groups that would say, I am against police brutality, they need to be able to organize themselves, rather than each one have a separate voice. That's what I'm saying. And everybody here has to have something that they agree about, I hope. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I'm from Zimbabwe, and earlier on you were talking about how in the 60s the revolutionary Pan-African and frontline state leaders like Lumumba were a great inspiration to you. Right now, as you all know, most of this room would be vehemently against my president, who's Mugabe. But
what about that?
Mugabe is now seen as a demon because he's repressing his own people. But
you know that for sure?
No, that's what they say in the press.
Okay.
And that's what I hear from people. But I'm wondering, what is your opinion on what's going on as far as the land reform? And do you see his efforts to maintain that frontline position of majority first, not black or African first, but majority first? Do you see that as sustainable?
Well, see, with Mugabe, the problem, and I support Mugabe, don't get me wrong, don't say nothing like that. I can't, anytime the United States or Great Britain says anything about Africa at all, I dismiss it. The greatest oppressors of African people on the planet, right here, I dismissed them. But I would say this, Mugabe's problem is that he didn't press it when he had a chance. When all of those colonial powers were leaving Africa, that's when he should have put them people out. You see, because that land is still owned not by individual white farmers. That's owned by the state. That's owned by Britain. You know, and it's impossible for you to say these people wouldn't be criticizing if it wasn't happening. They criticize all the time. That's what they're doing. Why? Because they want to reestablish that national oppression. And Mugabe won't. Now, I'm not saying he has not made mistakes. You know, who knows? Even I have made mistakes. But I mean, but I'm talking about that. The mistake he made was that he didn't put them out when he could have put them out. See, and left them around like festering bodies to when they get the chance, when their public opinion is turned all the way around, then they come for it. They come for him. So I can't, this guy who got the coalition government, Svengari, what's his name?
Changarai.
Yeah, I did not, them people who didn't fight the revolutionary struggle, had nothing to do with putting Ian Smith and the people out of there. Now they're going to come and we want, you want nothing. You have to struggle to make this country better, but to be put in power by money from overseas, I can't accept that.
And the reason why I mentioned, some in this room is there's a big push. It's almost like a takeover of the progressive movement in the United States, which supported the ZANU-PF guerrillas during the independence war. There's now a big push by almost the same group of people to fight Mugabe because they see him as a block to democracy. So it's been flipped on its head. And I'm 25, and I can see through that. And it's like, there's not enough of it coming, from sources like here, where it was so strong back in the 70s and 60s.
No, that's fraudulent. But you see, it's like the Sisyphus syndrome. You roll a rock up, they roll it back down. You roll it back up, they roll it back down. They don't roll it down as far, hopefully, but they roll it back down. See, you had the Obama election, they're rolling it back down. By November, a year later, you've got people, out in the street talking about Obama, they have the power to do that. But you have to be resolute in the struggles against these people, But the tip-off always is Great Britain and the United States. You understand? And you would hope that Obama would come out stronger on some of these issues. Certainly, like in the Trinidad conference, I thought what was positive is the inference that there would be more trade, more relationship with Cuba, and support for the whole Cuba, Venezuelan, Bolivian, now Paraguay, Brazil, to whatever extent you can accept support for that left, Nicaragua, because Latin America has moved to the left, those countries, and I think we have to support that. But trying to get Obama to do that, that's going to be our struggle.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Tonin. I have a question about, I haven't really been up to date with covering current events for myself. Sorry, louder. But something that touches me personally is mental health care in central Tennessee, which is voted Democratic, but I've heard nobody besides myself understanding the struggles that the Hospital Corporation of America has presence there in Nashville, and a lot of the low-income mental health patients are being treated by workers that are funded by strictly drugs that treat them, and that I was just wondering if there's any way, if you know anything about how that is going to be regulated, or because they misdiagnose people all the time and give them drugs that are just for testing purposes. Governor Bredesen is Republican, I think.
So let me follow you here. So this is a question concerning the pharmaceutical companies' takeover of mental health care system.
Right.
Okay. Can you address that?
Well, that's where we had the struggle. I mean, that's what the struggle was about. I mean, the people struggling against Obama's health care thing are those companies, the people that are making all this money. That's why the struggle existed in the first place. I mean, most people in their right mind wouldn't be against a reconstructed health bill, except you have people lobbying every day against that. And what are they lobbying for? Their maximum profit. That's all it's about. It's about money, Mr. Hirschman, what's up?
Hey. Hi, Amiri. It was very clarifying. I'm speaking as a member, and I know you sent a poem also for an anthology proposed, of the Revolutionary Poets Brigade that we've started here. Many members are here in the room listening to you and getting some clarifications. I found it very interesting. The main object of your talk was this question of the coalition with 90% of African Americans voting for Obama. That's 90% of 12%. Is an enormously powerful body of people on an electoral plane. And then you're speaking of the Latino, Asian, and progressive white populations. In effect, without speaking so much of the class operation of this, this is really quite accurately the possibility of the future. In the light of that, and in the light of the administration and the fact that Obama is the first African-American president of the United States, many of us, and this is a local issue, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it that way, many of us here have worked with a truly revolutionary figure who was in the Obama administration. His name is Van Jones. Really a bulwark against police brutality in the area, and I would like to know what your response is in relation to Van's having to quit the administration in this year, because after all, if you want that coalition to work, It has to be measured or reflected in the government itself, and Obama's silence on that has us, many of us, very troubled.
I can agree with that. You know, there was also a guy earlier in the year who was supposed to be a new head of national security. I can't think of his name, who was shot down the same way, you know, and had to resign. It's unfortunate, I don't know, but I think that the only defense we have against that is having a voice of that coalition. The things that you say need to be heard and read throughout the country. But that's one of our weaknesses, that we don't have that voice. You know, we don't have that voice. We don't have the voice to fight against the Dobbses and the O'Reillys and the Hannitys. But that's what we need. We need blow for blow, you know. And you know that if we had the voice to say the things that need to be said, whenever they say something about it.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing, that's the only way that can be stopped. It's the only way to be stopped. Otherwise, they're going to pick off everybody. You know, what they're in a position now to do is undermine and defeat. And we're the only force that can stop that. I don't know what, we keep calling for united front, we keep calling for anti-sectarian kind of unity, but it's slow in coming. It's slow in coming, you know. The major parties that we're talking about, not Democrats and Republicans, the other major parties, have shown no, I don't know, desire, but no attempt to this broad unifying coalition. I think until we discover how we can put together our forces. And see, I don't care, like the dude who was just up here about, we can argue all day, I don't care, I can argue with anybody. But at the end, we're gonna have to say, but this is what we're gonna do. Or this is what we're gonna say. You know what I mean? And you can go out there and say, I don't agree with that, but that's what we're gonna do.
Thanks.
Be a book signing and a number of books for sale at the back. Thank you.
And before you leave, in the back of the audience, of the auditorium, in the white farm, if you fill the farm out and give us your feedback.
One more question.
Thank you.
Amiri, one more question. Thank you very much. Happy birthday. All due respect to everyone here, but there is an elephant in the room, and we're not looking at it. And it's not separable from the issues that have been discussed tonight. It's an extension of it. It's one and the same issue. It has the same roots, and it's called Afghanistan. And what are we going to do? What are you going to do? What advice can you give us? What can we do? What should a policy be to stop the intrusion of tens of thousands of more troops into Afghanistan by the forces of whom Barack Obama, bless him, is the commander-in-chief? How about that? Is that an elephant?
Well, I say this, you know, about that. First of all, he didn't bring them people there. The question is, how is he going to get them out of there? That's the question. I think that's important. And now that the two generals have turned against him, you know, what's his name, Petraeus and the other guy. McChrystal. Now that they're beginning to deliver ultimatums about they must have those troops, this is going to be a hot issue. But I make the same point. We have no power except our power to act in coalition against that. There's not any, well, there might be some people in here who believe it needs to be in Afghanistan. My thing about Afghanistan is that Bush, those 8 years, have created a trend in that area that many people would like to see us dead. There's a lot of people who would like to see everybody in the United States dead, the colored ones too. The question is, how do we get out of that? How do we get out of that? Are we going to leave the Al-Qaeda running it? Is that our business? You know, are we going to let, what's the other group? The Taliban run it? Where is Osama bin Laden? The question is, what are we going to do about it? The only thing I can say we have to do is come out forthrightly against it again and again. We must leave Afghanistan. We must get out of Afghanistan. The best way we can get out of Afghanistan, you know what I mean? What's his name? What was the general who said that? You know, you drop it, you break it, you know. Powell. He said before that, if you go and do that, you were going to be in charge of it. But I don't want to be in charge of that, you know. And I think that Obama's got to find a way to get out of there. But what is he going to do against these two generals? He needs our support. You know, McChrystal.
So how do we give it to him?
The only way we can do is write it and talk it and organize it. That's the only thing we can do. I mean, the idea of what kind of action is possible from us. The only action I know is possible is for us to write and talk it. You know, unless you got a demonstration, and even demonstration, unless it's a huge demonstration. But what I'm afraid of is the military actually now beginning to make policy. You know, and that's incorrect. You know. Yeah. Okay. All right. We've got to find a way as a group to fight that. That's what I'm saying. And there's no other, I mean, just individual complaining about it is not going to work.
I just didn't think we should listen to all the good things that were said in here for that long without noticing the element.
Well, that's right. We still have to do something about it. Afghanistan didn't start with Obama. You know, the question is, he's got to get rid of it.
Sean, nice to meet you.